guys, and essentially just was, hit the ground running to like get my license and everything. And then I was dialing and closing around end of January. Yeah.
What were you doing before this?
So my background, I was in the Marine Corps for 5 years, got out. That's where I actually met Kyle and Zach. They're also on this call at ASU. We all power lifted together. So that's why when I saw somebody I know posting about it, I was like, oh, I should probably check this out and see what it's about. But then before that, in the interim, I was doing executive protection, just like undercover armed security. Have zero sales experience whatsoever.
Well, bro, if this insurance thing doesn't work out, it's good to know who I can hire for a personal bodyguard. So awesome. What was your first couple weeks like? Were you just crushing it right off the bat? Was it a little bit of a learning curve?
So it wasn't necessarily like a bit of a learning curve. Like Kyle's very good at essentially outlining what needs to be done and what it looks like. He sets very clear expectations of, what you're getting into and what you have to do. So I was currently working my old job, and that was Wednesday through Friday, 12-hour days. So I wasn't able to do anything else. And then I would come into the office with him Saturday through Tuesday, 12 hours, just sitting next to him and just ripping, just dialing, getting feedback from him, getting feedback from others. And yeah, it was kind of just all clicked pretty quick.
Okay, nice. And you coming off your biggest month, which last month you IP'd 60K?
Yes.
Love it. Okay. Bro, break down the schedule, inputs, everything else, just some tactical tips and tricks you can give to the agents on here so everybody can to have a $60,000 month.
Yeah. So I definitely attribute that to, Kyle laying that out because I personally am not like the best with forming my schedule. I always think certain things take longer or less time than they actually do. So kind of screws my schedule up a little bit. So he's able to, sit down with me, essentially show me what's needed to be done during certain time blocks, which is definitely a strength of his. He's definitely good at talent development. So
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
essentially, dialing for I'd say like 4 hours in the morning, 4 hours in the afternoon, and just staying consistent, like just doing what he was telling me to do. It really is that simple, and a lot of people kind of get out of that, mindset because it can be mundane and boring, but you just need to buckle down and do that so that your learning curve is as fast as possible, and then you can become self-sufficient, is really the main thing there.
Was there anything deeper within those time blocks of like, was it just 4 hour time blocks or was it like, all right, 4 hours, this is what the inputs look like. This is what you need to do. This is how many conversations you need to have. What did that look like?
Yes, there were, target KPIs, but I was just essentially just doing what I needed to do as long as I needed to do it. So, I was tracking my dials, obviously tracking answers, tracking, all the KPIs that we normally track. And then we would review them at the end of the week. It wasn't like a daily thing, but he would be giving me, feedback on daily in regards to how I was, approaching calls, the problems I was encountering. Um, and then the biggest thing for me was, the application, because I had to have him close the first few via the application because you don't want to take too long on the call. Because, they'll eventually be like, all right, this is taking too long and hang up and you'll never get a hold of them. So that helped out a lot. But then once you get comfortable with a lot of the applications, that's just when I, took off and started running.
Got it. What are your non-negotiable daily or weekly KPIs?
Um, that's a tough one. I haven't necessarily got away from the KPIs, right? But my non-negotiables are I will buy leads every single week and I text blast them immediately, obviously, as most people should. Seeing what I get on the books for that via appointments, and then still having, a block of time. More so now, it's like 3 hours in the morning, 3 hours in the afternoon, where I'm just constantly dialing, talking to people, setting appointments, um, tracking, what if I encounter, certain objections. I've got the other big closer right next to me, Cruz. So, we shoot back and forth on what to say in certain situations. So, it's very important to have those, after action talks on certain things because you don't want to, the worst thing you can do is just continually repeat the same mistake over and over again. And then you're never going to learn from that.
Speaking of Cruz, because I was texting you before this call, so your biggest week is 35.
Yes, that was,
Cruz has done right around there.
yeah.
Who has the biggest record week?
It probably is Cruz because I remember that I had some, fully underwritten ones that I think fell off that week. So I think Cruz has that title for sure.
Okay, we'll find out when the issue paid reports comes out. But I want to point that out though because that's an important point to make. Is I really want to emphasize that where seeing you guys at the lock-in, bro, you and Cruz, you guys were both locked in, literally. Where you guys are, you're helping families, you're dialing the phones, you keep each other like you feed off that energy, and that energy is contagious. And for me, when I was dialing and when I was closing, if I was this, I remember one time, this was in our when I first got started, I was working out of another office as a brand new agent, and there was this guy beside me, and he's like, oh man, like these leads, bro, it's been a tough day. And I looked at him and I closed my laptop up and I got up out of my chair and then I went across the room and sat down somewhere else because that energy is contagious and it feeds off of each other. So, being around low performers or low energy or low frequency people, dude, bro, that's going to bring your production down and that's going to bring your vibes down. But like you and Cruz, like being locked in, like you're with somebody, the vibes are high. You might be having a bad day, but like Cruz just closed the deal. So you're like, oh, dude, like, what am I doing? Like, I'm just being a pussy or whatever it is. Like, you feed off of each other and that competitiveness, that energy that those frequencies are higher, and that's a testament to like your biggest week's 35. Cruz did that about exactly that 35K. That goes to show you did 60K last month. Cruz had a monster month, and it goes back to Alfano pointed that out at the leadership retreat too, and you were there and you saw that where the first workout and the first exercise we did was planks till failure, and it was me and Ronnie were the last two standing, and we were right next to each other because there's something about I don't know if it's energy or aura or frequencies or whatever it is, but like when you're in that vicinity with other high producers, you do feed off of that. And so I would encourage you guys just like really audit not only who you're talking to, but also who you're in a vicinity with on a daily basis and make sure that you are around people that you want to emulate and you want to be like.
100%. 100%.
So let me ask you this, Thomas. I try to keep these calls, trying to keep it more tactical and really just provide value to everybody in this call. So what were some tactical things that maybe you struggled with as an agent or had to overcome, or certain things that you changed in your sales process to better help families and close more deals?
So right off the rip, I was, just sticking to the script. You're seeing it as more so of a process. And then once I kind of shifted my mindset to, just have a conversation with this person, making it, friendly and conversational, it becomes way easier to kind of exploit what's holding them back, what they actually want, and how you can actually help them. So if you're not, like actively listening to what they're saying, you're never going to get anywhere with them because they're going to be able to feed off of that. Like, oh, this guy's not listening to me. He's just going through this process. He doesn't care. He's just trying to sell me something. So, being more conversational, but still keeping it on track because it's also a dangerous territory for them to go on tangents and start talking about their life and their kids. Cause, I'm sure all of you get on the phone with some of those old people and they don't have a lot of interaction or social interaction. So they're going to just start yapping your ear off. And you got to respectfully, pull them back into the, your straight line and be like, hey, Donna, oh, that's really great to hear. Just to to make sure that we're respectful of your time as well as mine, let's get these questions answered. And we'll have plenty of time to talk about this, once we finalize everything, something like that. Um,
Absolutely. I love that. That was well said. But I want to dig further into that because we say that all the time of like, oh, you need to, there's a difference of listening to a client and actively listening. And I've noticed that within myself where I've gotten caught up where certain days maybe I'm tired or it's just one of those off days where I'm kind of just like going through the motions and I'm listening. Like I hear him, I'm writing it down, doing that five, but I'm not actively listening. So dig deeper and explain to people the difference between like really intentionally listening and understanding and having that level of personableness and empathy with the clients that you're helping on the phones. Because I hear you, bro, and it's like you're smooth with it, but you and Cruz both like you guys have that empathy, you got that charisma, and you're able to, like you said, you don't get off track, maintain the straight line, but while still like having a little bit of that banter and building a little bit of that credibility and rapport with the client.
yeah, no, so I'd say, on the baseline of listening, right, you're hearing everything they're saying, but you're not portraying to them that you are listening, right? So then when you're actively listening, it's a form of engagement where you're still you're hearing what they're saying, but you're essentially almost like if when you're talking with a girl, you need to affirm them and make sure that they know they're being heard and that you're continuously addressing the needs that they're expressing or understanding, even though it may be objections, but understanding the position that they're in, um, to where they think that you're actually trying to help them. And an example of that would be like if they're telling you like they just got laid off, right? And you're like, all right, so would $50 be taking food off the table or something? That would like turn them off immediately because they're like, didn't you just hear me? I said I'm unemployed, like I'm struggling to make ends meet. And realistically, they probably could afford something that's $50 a month, but there's different ways to go about that versus just going into that. Like maybe something like, oh no, Janice, I'm really sorry to hear that. That is tough. I hope that situation improves. But I can also look over some options that could be possibly, fitting for your situation. And then, when the time comes where your financial situation does improve, we can always increase that coverage then. But, make sure that we get you something in place so that you are protected, in that time, because I'm assuming that situation is going to look pretty tough, while you're unemployed. And if you were to also, God forbid, pass away, that'd be looking pretty tough. And kind of you're just easing into it versus spiking to the point.
Absolutely. And it's so easy for us to get into that of like want to like give an immediate quick reply. Like or like, get into a little bit of an arm wrestling match with the client. Guys, pay attention to we talk about it all the time, but it's so important. Pay attention to not only what Thomas said, but also how he's saying it. That empathy and that charisma behind his voice. And that was really good. Would you mind repeating that one more time for guys to write that down? Because that's a really good rebuttal for people to use if they do say they can't afford it or they got laid off.
Yeah, yeah. Like Janice, I am really sorry to hear that. That's a tough situation. Um, we the call was regarding, this coverage to get in place, but we can always adjust that, price so that it's not necessarily affecting you too much, but to ensure that you do have some coverage in this time period where you are struggling a little bit, because that situation would only get worse for your family, in the event that something bad were to happen to you, like God forbid, passing away. Um, and then kind of, seeing where that goes. You're essentially just interjecting little bits. You're essentially just poking the bear instead of stabbing it with a spear. So you're just poking it, seeing how they react, feeling them out, and then you're also going to get more information for them to divulge. Like, because it could also be a situation. This is just a random situation, but they could have lost their job, but they could have like 1 million in their savings account. So you have no idea what their situation is unless you are able to pull that information from them, which is only going to benefit you in traversing the sale.
Yes, absolutely. What other, maybe objections or track words that have you implemented that you found success with?
The one of the biggest ones that comes to mind is something that Gabe went over when he came out here. And it's in that book, Never Split the Difference, I believe. It's when you're disagreeing with the client, you never want to say no, but, and you want to say yes and. So when he was given a training over here and he said that, I really implemented it. So every time a client will say something that is completely false or I disagree with, you're just like, yes, yes. And actually, it actually works this way, not the way you're thinking. But if you come off with no, but you're thinking about this completely wrong, Janice, right? Like, no, that's not correct. Then it's going to spark some frustration and you're really going to feel that clashing with the client. And once you start arguing with them, as most of you guys know, you pretty much have lost the sale if you start arguing. So it's kind of like tactfully arguing with them where they feel as though you're hearing them, you hear their point, like, yes, I hear what you're saying. And then implementing like a slight correction or directing them towards your perspective and your point.
Mm, that's good. That's good. And Never Split the Difference, phenomenal book. Everybody in this call should read that book if they haven't. Technically, it's a negotiation book, but it's the best book on sales I've ever read. Okay. What are some what are some ways where I'm assuming you're option closing throughout the entire process
Say
with
that
the
one
client?
more time.
I'm assuming as you're going through it, you're option closing them and building the why throughout the entire your entire sales process.
Yes, yes.
What are some track words regarding building the why that you use to like really establish the value within what you're doing?
Yeah. So I know I'm trying to think of some track words, but it essentially depends on the situation that they're in. But the big indicator that we all usually have, especially in the mail-in leads, is going to be their age, right? So if they're young, obviously they're statistically more than likely not thinking about coverage in the event that they die because they're young. Everybody who's young, 20s and 30s, they're like, I'm gonna live forever. Nothing doesn't matter. I got plenty of time, right? And nothing's gonna happen to me. So when I'm building the why with younger clients, it's more so geared towards, cash accumulation. Obviously, if they're healthy, which usually younger people are healthy, so you can't really miss too far there. So, I'm mainly pitching like IULs or just the cash accumulation factor of whole life policies. And then, I see how they react to that. And then I double down on, hey, yeah, you're also receiving, this massive coverage amount in conjunction with developing a massive conservative investment vehicle that's tax sheltered. And then that's kind of how I process that with younger clients. And then the cherry on the top, I'll throw in if I still don't feel like I have them is, I'll throw in that litigation proof asset. So, hey, if this is litigation proof, right? They're not going to be able to come after um, your life insurance, especially while you're still living. It does depend on state to state because I was researching this a little bit ago, but most cases they can't touch that while you're still living. It gets weird and finicky, after a death takes place. But yeah,
Mm, that
that's what I'll do for younger clients. Then for older clients, it's geared for, that protection, emphasizing, that this is their biggest asset that they're protecting, ensuring that they are putting their family or dependents in the best situation possible. Um, but I'd say, that's probably it in terms of track words.
it's a good value add. Well, I tell you what, it's been months since we've done a role play here on a team call. Are you down to just role play like I'm a client and rip through it?
Yeah, sure. Do it.
I'll go easy on you, bro. I know I'm putting you on the spot,
Okay.
but all right, ring ring. Or
Hello?
you ring ring ring.
Yeah, ring ring.
Hello?
Hey, is this Jonah Lewis?
Yeah, who is this?
Hey, Jonah, how you doing? My name's Thomas Palmisano. I manage the brokerage that handles all the mortgage protection files for Navy Federal Credit Union. Um, and your file associated with that 123 Main Street come across my desk this afternoon. Um, let's see here. It's just showing me as incomplete. Sometime around when you initially closed on that $250,000 property, you would have received several things in the mail regarding that mortgage protection, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Got it.
We got a bunch of stuff in the mail. Is this required?
It's not necessarily required, right? But it's similar to car insurance where, 99% of Americans have it because they're not willing to pay out of pocket the damages that are going to possibly occur to their vehicle as well as another's. So that's why it's, a very important coverage to have. Um, so I'm the senior medical underwriter in Arizona. And your file's just showing flagged here with no notes. So I was assuming, that maybe one of our junior underwriters had walked you through this process already. Is that correct,
Ye-
or you slipped through the crack?
Yeah, we got a call about 6 months ago. And we told the guy we really can't afford it right now.
Okay, that's interesting. We would never present you options that were unaffordable. Our goal is to, provide you the minimum amount of coverage to meet your needs. So do you have any serious health or medical conditions? Let's kind of dive into that and see, what was possibly holding you back.
Yeah, well, let's do an equity protection. So yeah, I had a heart attack about 4 years ago.
Oh, you had a heart attack? And they said the quotes they were giving you were just a little out of price range?
Yeah, they were quoting me like two, $300 a month.
Gotcha, gotcha. Well, you were most likely speaking with one of our junior underwriters. They don't necessarily have access to all the carriers that are available in your state. So, let's just take a second to kind of dive a little deeper into those health conditions, and I'll see what I can do for you. But it shouldn't be, anywhere near that amount.
Okay.
All
Can I
right.
just get a quote?
Yeah, that's so in order for me to, accurately give you a quote, it is based off your age and health. So that's why we have to take a look at that information and then see what we can do from there.
Okay.
And then so from there, they'd be like, okay, because I've gotten that before where they're like, yeah, I have stage 4 liver disease and they weren't able to get me any coverage. And I'm like, whoa, you must have been speaking with one of our junior underwriters that doesn't have access to, all the carriers in your state. We cover people with, medical conditions like that all the time. And then usually that is then followed up by what you started with, the price objection. So then they'll be like, yeah, but it's going to be like this much money. And then essentially my whole premise of going through that process is how can I keep them in the conversation long enough to keep deriving this information out? Because the longer you're in the conversation, the more information you're getting, and then the more able you are to build value. So I know in the FI there's a question with how much money do you have left over at the end of the month? Um,
Mhm.
I'm not a fan of that question because I believe that if it is important enough to a person, they're going to figure out a way to budget it, right?
Yep.
Just like with every one of with I'm sure with every one of you, like there's certain things you spend a lot of money on, and then other things you're like, oh, I don't want to spend $5 on that, but then you like spent $200 on, something else, and you don't even bat an
Correct.
eye for it. So if you're able to, find that out, build that value by keeping them in the conversation, it will eventually change their mind or shift their perspective to like, oh shoot, that actually doesn't sound too bad at all. Maybe we can, and then you'll start to feel them shift from the no, not interested to a maybe, and then you keep elaborating on those target points that are building that value, and then eventually you should be able to get them to consider submitting an application just to kind of just to see, just be like, hey, John, we just want to make sure that it's an option for you. And there's only one way to do that, and it's to find out if you qualify by us submitting an application.
How do you, that was good. How do you overcome, because we acknowledged overcoming the I can't afford it at the beginning. How do you overcome the I can't afford it objection after you present numbers?
So I go a more unorthodox way of presenting numbers. Obviously, it's going to be dependent on, a ton of variables. I'm looking at what their mortgage balance is. Is it a dual income household, right? Which you can gauge from like very minimal questioning. Um, and basically, I get into that obviously after you get all their information, their age, health history, and whatnot. And I'll start with, hey, John, just to let you know, you do qualify for 300,000 in coverage. So let's say his mortgage is 120,000. Hey, John, you do qualify for up to 300,000 in coverage. That's looking like right around, let's say, $200. Um, and then just to give you, like a little inside look on that. And then some people will be like, oh, okay. Right. And then from there, you can kind of gauge, hey, that price actually wasn't too bad for them. Right. Or if they're like, whoa, they'll be like, ooh, I don't know if I can hack them. Be like, don't worry. Normally families don't do that. I just wanted to inform you on what you do qualify for. Hypothetically, if, your financial situation changes, we can always increase that coverage. But, let me just give you that full mortgage coverage amount. It is looking like right around $95. And then when you do it that way too, you're essentially comparing two price ranges, which even if that 95 is a lot for them, you just started with that 200 and then easing back to 90, they see it as like, whoa, that's actually kind of a good deal. That's the psychology of starting at a higher price point. And also, I've done this before. I don't really advise for it, but you can give ranges and kind of see how they feel about a range. That's actually in the Never Split the Difference book. He's always talking about negotiating. When you're negotiating salaries or whatnot, you want to give a range because you never want to trap yourself in a situation where you're locked. Like this is what your counter offer is or something to the company. So you give a range,
Mhm.
and even the range won't hurt you on the low end because usually it is closer to the high end, is what was his premise in the book.
Good. That's good. I've never heard anybody doing it that way. Let me ask you, so if they have money, do you ever just throw out obnoxiously large options? Like, and John, it looks like you'll qualify for, about between 700 to 900 bucks a month. Do you throw out options like that to get a feeler?
Um, I definitely have. I definitely have. But more than likely, I've never ran into like a fresh case like that, meaning like they have no coverage and they have all this money. The most recent one that I ran into was, they had money and they were paying like $1,700 between the two of them for they both had $250,000 policies through, I believe it was Northwestern Mutual. And I was able to match the coverage and decrease their total pricing to $1,100. So it's way easier to do it in terms of replacement because you know exactly what numbers you're dealing with and what to beat. But no, definitely with people with a lot of money, it gets tricky because they also could be, more educated on that, knowing like they could also have, if they have a lot of money, more than likely they're searching, right? If they inquired about it, they've been doing their research, they're kind of getting quotes, seeing what's out there. So in those cases, you're going to want to be as direct and specific as possible because there is a massive difference in, let's say, whole life coverage pricing versus, indexed universal life pricing or universal life pricing.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. I want to dig into that. Well, actually, before we dig, Hannah asked a good question. She said, "Are you usually showing term or whole life?" Sounds like
Oh,
you're showing
I
whole life.
always I always push for whole life or universal life, something where they're able to have something at the end of it. Because when you get into the weeds of term, like they are just actually screwing themselves. And I've recently, it's funny, I've actually gotten a lot of people that they're like, yeah, I watched Dave Ramsey and he says get term insurance because it's a scam and blah blah blah. And it's just it's when I get those, it's like, oh God, I'm gonna have to be talking with him for a while on this because you're I've changed people's minds in that respect too. But that once you have somebody that has a term or is looking for a term. And then you're just educating them on what a term actually is and then how it differs from universal life or whole life. If they have any notion of common sense, you're going to hook them immediately. I think this week I converted two people that had terms to index universal life. And once you illustrate for them and break it down Barney style, that they are
Bernie
literally
style.
burning money and over the like I like to illustrate it over an interim. So like let's say they have a 20-year term and they're paying, let's just say $100 a month. So
Well,
$1,200 a
let's well, Thomas, let me stop you there because I really want to dig into that. That's good. So talk to me just like I'm a client. Let's say I got a 20-year term policy.
year.
Go into explaining and presenting how you would convert my term to an IUL.
Gotcha, gotcha. So I'd be okay, Jonas. So you said you got a 20-year term there with Americo. What were you paying for that exactly? You said, oh, okay, around $150. All right, all
Yep,
right. So are you aware of, the difference between, term, whole life, and accidental? And then usually they say
I think
yes.
so.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
my bad. I'll do it the real thing. Yeah, you think so? Okay, just a quick recap. You've got your whole life, which is continually building cash value. It never expires. So those monthly premiums, they're going into a tax sheltered account that are continually stacking. Um, and in the event of an IUL, they're indexed to the market. So you're, looking at an interest rate growth of around 6 to 8% annually. Um, Now with term, right, that's is short for terminate. You're looking at a specific duration of time where you are essentially burning money, you're renting that insurance. So at the end of your term, which you have a 98% chance of outliving, you're going to have nothing to show for from all that coverage. And in your event, that's going to be $24,000 down the drain, right? And then I'll get into a derivative. I'll say, and there's also a derivative of term, which is accidental. You're only going to get paid out in that event if the accident was actually an accident. And then I'll throw in there how essentially insurance companies have, they're trying to prove that the accident was in fact your fault so that you don't get paid out. So I paint the picture that it's me and the client versus the carrier, and I'm giving them, the inside information on to help them see through, the profiting of the insurance company. So I'll also hit on how, the term policies is how those insurance carriers actually, make most of their money because they don't owe you anything at the end of that term. And the statistics are there that you're most likely going to outlive it. And then I'll go back into an IUL, compare the price. So let's say you were paying that $100. It'll be like, okay, so, for your age risk class that you're at, you would be looking at right around $160. So yeah, that's a $60 increase, but you're just going to be building this cash value over time so that let's say you only did need that coverage for 15 years, you're going to be able to surrender that policy and get all that cash plus the interest accrued back to you in a lump sum tax-free check, um, which some people will use to pay off their home early, you know, give them a few examples of how it can be utilized. And also referring to, I'll say a lot of my clients like to do this because there's a psychology factor. I don't know the exact name for it, but essentially people
Herd
will,
mentality.
what's
Everybody
that?
wants to be doing it.
Herd mentality. Exactly. So when
Yep.
they find out, a lot of people, or, if you can illustrate like a lot of people are doing this, they're going to be more inclined to buy from you. And a lot of people who know this is going to be like pest control and solar. Hey, John, I just installed solar panels over at your neighbor Mary's and your neighbor John's. They're loving that they're saving all this money on electricity. I just wanted to see if I could, take a look at your house and see what we could do for you. And that you just essentially develop credibility with them, showing that it is, a known product in their neighborhood. And they'll be like, oh shit, Susie and John are doing that. Think I might, think I might take a look, see what you can offer me.
Yes, yes, so good. Everybody wants to be doing what everybody else is doing. So this has been gold. A lot of tactical, tangible tips and gold nugs have been dropped here. One more question, then or one more question for you, Thomas, then we'll open it up if anybody else has questions. How do you overcome the dreaded I need to like you're on the phone with them for an hour and 10 minutes. You built rapport. Everything's going well. You show them numbers and they're like, Thomas, we just gotta think about it. But we're for sure gonna get it. How do you overcome that?
Okay, yes, I get this a lot. Um, so I actually just came across another way to go about it that I'm going to try out here soon, but how I've been going about it.
Give us the one that works, the one that's been working for you, that allowed you to have a 35K week.
Yes. So, um, the main goal in that instance is you want to relieve pressure. They're in a very pressurized environment now. They're like, "Oh God, I got to make a decision," and it's essentially the decision that's causing them this fatigue or this back off because they're under so much pressure. So I alleviate the pressure by saying, yeah, John, I totally understand it. It is something to think about. However, we don't actually have anything to think about until we know that that's a true option. So I can see that, yeah, based off what you're telling me about your health, you should qualify. But ultimately, it's going to be up to the carrier. So what we can do is make sure that we get this application submitted. We'll hear back from the carrier in about 24 to 48 hours. And then from there, we can make a decision on where you want to go. And also from there, I'll also illustrate like, because obviously with that, they're like, well, I gotta pay or something. No, John, you don't have to pay necessarily right now. I can push that out about 30 days for you. So it gives us that massive time block so you can talk it over with whoever you need to talk it over. Make sure you get that policy packet in the mail so you're able to review everything. And then, when we hear back from the carrier, um, you'll get that news, and then you'll also have an additional week or two to think about it, with your spouse, and we can reconnect then. So I found that that works really well because you're removing that pressure that is causing them to back out necessarily of the sale. Because a lot of these clients think they're getting into some contractual agreement that they can't get out of, and they're committing to something for life, essentially. A lot of people, see mortgage protection or insurance that way. So once you do that, it alleviates the pressure, but allows you to close. And then that 24, 48 hours later, if it does go to underwriting, right? You give them a ring back. Hey, John, congratulations, man. I just heard back from the carrier. You are approved, which is awesome. Just wanted to let you know that so that we can, figure out which way you wanted to essentially go with that coverage. And usually the psychology behind that is essentially you're pulling it away from them with the fact of you saying, "Hey, I'm not necessarily sure you will get approved." Like it is ultimately up to the carrier. You're pulling it away from them. And then after that, and you finalize it and close it, you're calling them back with this good news. Hey, you got approved. Now that they have it, they're less inclined to be like, no, I don't need it or I don't want it. Because you're approaching it with like congratulating them, like, hey, this is a big deal. You got approved. I'm really glad I could help you out. And in my experience, that has been the easiest and best way to close those people who get that decision fatigue or decision pressure.
Okay. I I like a lot of what you said. And following up is huge. Like always follow up, always let them know they're approved. I do have to disagree with one thing though, because you may have a different experience, but for me, whenever I push the draft date out, a lot of times they would cancel or the policy would charge back. And so I like your process, and there's always going to be those clients where you're going to have to push it back, but I try to keep that like that's absolute last case resort if I have to. So before that, one thing I found that has worked well for me was, saying, okay, John, well, completely understand. You need to think about it. Obviously, this is your insurance. Let me ask you, is it the price that you need to think about, or is it which option you want to go with? And or yeah, if it is it if you need to think about it, you want the coverage at all, or is it which option you want to go with? And then typically, if they say they need to if I even want the coverage, then I go back into building the why, but you're usually wasting your time with that. It's almost always which option. And so from there, I say something very similar to what you said, but I say, Thomas, I do what's called annual reviews with my clients. So what that means is I'll be giving you a call about every year or so. I'll call and check in. I'll say, hey Thomas, how's everything going? If you say I'm doing great, everything's going well financially, I want to increase the coverage, you have the option to. Or if you say, hey, I'm actually struggling, things are a little tight, you have the option to decrease that. So a lot of guys use that object. I know like pretty much your whole office uses that, but that's one thing where when you give them the two routes to go down of, which option do you want to go with? And then they say that because like you brought up a good point. They just don't want to think that they're locked and they're bound into a contractual agreement. That's really at the end of the day. So however you want to phrase it that way, but it's like just letting the people know, like, hey, you know, and if you ever do want to make adjustments, this is my direct cell number. So if you ever want to change the coverage, make adjustments, drop it up, drop it down, give me a call, and I can be a lot more help than waiting on hold with the insurance carrier for an hour. I always say that with clients because also if they do ever think about canceling, I want them calling me, not the insurance company.
100%. Yeah, I do the same thing. And with replacements too, which some people don't necessarily agree with. They say, yeah, I'll give you the number. You can call them. But I make sure I do it because if I am confirming, I call the carrier, I dial them in, and I am with them while they surrender that policy. I know that the only policy now that they have is mine, so the chances of that being charged back are minimal. Um, versus if you're just telling them, hey, this is the number. Most people are lazy. They're going to be like, you know what? I liked what I had. I don't even know what this is about. I'm just not even going to go through with this new one. Right? Unless you illustrated some massive changes that are going to like they're saving money and it's more coverage or something crazy like that. They have to have a massive driver for them to change because change only occurs when it's too painful to not change. And most cases for our industry is going to be that price or that coverage amount.
Mm, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we're going on about 50 minutes here. We'll open it up. If anybody has any questions, feel free to unmute or drop them in the chat. Let everybody go at once. Well, Thomas, looks like you crushed it, bro. So closing parts, close us out.
Um,
Question.
oh, question. Go
Quick
ahead.
question. Are you just doing like 1 to 2 years right now, or what's that time frame that you're working right now?
So it varies. I have been liking 7 to 12 months.
Okay.
Recently, don't like 6 months. Right? They're getting, I don't know what it is about them, but they're getting blown up.
Hmm.
I don't know what the deal is there with those 6 months. Um, but yeah, I'd say 7 to 12, 1 to 2s are probably my favorite. And maybe every once in a while get some cheap 4 to 5 or even older, just text blast them,
Hmm.
kind of get something on the
You're not
flip.
calling those, you're just texting him.
I would when I first started, but now, given the pricing that they're at, I would probably just text blast them and then maybe throw them to a downline without calling them so that it's like still semi fresh. Um, kind of depends. But yeah, the 7 months to 2 years is my sweet spot right now.
Cool.
Love it. Thomas, did
Mhm.
anybody call you Thomas the Gray?
Thomas the Gray? No, I haven't. I haven't gotten
All
that.
right. Like Gandalf, I feel like everything you say is just it just sounds like it just sounds wisdom. Sounds like you have wisdom and experience with the silver hair. I love it. So close us out, bro. Give us some parting words of wisdom.
So if you're just starting out and you're a new agent, and you're having some trouble finding traction, just make sure you're sticking to your KPIs and your inputs and getting that input back from your upline, because that's the only way they're going to be able to kind of figure out where your what's causing you to not succeed. So you want to make sure you are hitting those KPIs. That's doing it for yourself, because if you don't, you're not going to get any feedback. They're not going to know where to troubleshoot, what's going on. Um, and then also, they just want to throw in there something that massively changed my life and has made me produce at a high level was getting on TRT. So if you're feeling some low decibels in there, make sure you adjust those properly. All right, get your labs done, and you're gonna love it. All right, it's gonna help you out a lot.
I was just telling somebody the life insurance starter pack is the 4:30 a.m. alarm, TRT, and a Bible verse on your story. That's the starter pack. All right, Thomas. Thank you, bro. Thank you for hopping on, pouring
All
into the
right.
boys. God bless everybody.